You may have just gotten a knock at the door from someone that delivered you a debt collection lawsuit from Midland, or you may have gotten a mailer from a bankruptcy attorney that said you've gotten sued from Midland Funding. Wherever you are at, you must deal with the lawsuit quickly to make sure you don't end with a default judgment in your face and a potential garnishment of your wages. In this video, we're going to cover a lot of things that can help you understand your options when you face a Midland Funding lawsuit. Welcome to Ascend's Finances YouTube channel, where we take complex topics such as lawsuits from Midland Funding and we simplify them into human, understandable language so you can make the most informed decision. My name is Ben and I am the co-founder and CEO of Ascend. So you're looking at a lawsuit and wondering, what are my different options? What we did is we built a free debt relief and options calculator that included a link in the description below. It's 100% free and you don't even have to provide an email address, but it gives you the cost, the duration, and kind of different options that you can consider when you're facing that Midland Funding lawsuit. And it also provides like pros and cons to these options. And so you get a really good sense of, what are my options when facing a Midland Funding lawsuit. So let's get started. So you're probably wondering, who is Midland Funding? Because you may not remember ever taking out a credit card or personal loan from Midland Funding LLC. And you know what? You're right. You probably haven't. But what happens is such financial institutions as Barclays, Synchrony, Chase, and Citibank use Midland Funding. Either they sell the debt to them or just use them as a collection agency when debt goes behind. So you may not recognize Midland Funding as the person who's the company that is suing you. You may actually remember the original creditor. So that's just something that is important to realize. The second thing that you may want to consider is, was the lawsuit and was the debt that they're suing you for within the statute of limitations for your state? And that's one of the most important questions to consider, because if it's past the statute of limitations, then you may not be, legally liable for that debt. And so one of the things to consider is understanding when you made that last payment on the debt, looking at your statute of limitations for your state and comparing that to the date when they are suing you for. And we built a debt statute of limitation calculator that helps you estimate the statute of limitations for your state, and I included a link in the description below. But here's the thing. Most often, if they're suing you, it's probably within the statute of limitations, but it's still something that is important to consider just in case, is Midland Funding suing you within the statute of limitations for the debt that they are talking about? Okay, so let's talk about the Midland Funding process and just what you can do at this stage. So a debt collection lawsuit generally begins when the creditor files a complaint with the state civil court and lists you as the defendant. The complaint provides the reason why the creditor is suing you and what the creditor wants to obtain in payment. Oftentimes, Midland here is looking for money that you owe plus interest, potentially late fees, potentially attorney fees, and potentially court costs. Now, the attorney representing the creditor or the creditor themselves will often notify you of the lawsuit by serving you. And this might be what you've had happen. This means that a copy of the complaint and a court summons is delivered to you by hand. So maybe a knock on the door, something like that. And I'm sorry that you went through with that, because that seems just very stressful to deal with in this situation. So what they're looking for is payment or a default judgment. And with a default judgment, the creditor may do one of the following based on your state. They may attempt to freeze money in your bank account, put a lien on your property if you own one, or garnish your wages. And that is a way that they can get funds for you by force. So one of the things that many people do is they respond to the debt collection lawsuit from Midland Funding. And this is important to respond because it basically says, hey, I'm going to take the time out to respond to this debt collection lawsuit. You may be wondering, how do you respond to debt collection lawsuit? I'm going to include a link in the description below that provides a resource that kind of goes step by step with how to respond if you want to respond. And that is one of the steps you can take. So later on in this video, we're actually also going to talk about maybe alternatives to responding to the lawsuit. And so you have options here. So I don't want you to get super stressed out, because you do have options. There's things that we're going to talk about in this video that are going to be really helpful. And by the way, we create a bunch of content for helping people get out of debt cheaper, easier, and faster through all their debt options. And if you like this video, we'd love it if you subscribe and like, because it really is encouraging to us and helps us make additional content that's unbiased, that tries to help you get out of debt in these tricky situations, these very stressful situations, in an unbiased way where you get all the information you need to make the most informed decision. Okay, so let's talk about handling the Midland Funding lawsuit. The first thing to do when you get sued by a Midland Funding is potentially determine whether you even owe the debt. Like, let's say if you owe the debt, let's talk about your options. So let's say it's not even your debt. they got the wrong name, they are suing the wrong person, that's something you really want to dig into. Like, do you even owe the debt? Now, many people will probably owe the debt because, they did due diligence on their end to make sure that you owe the debt. But let's talk about if you don't owe the debt, like you should definitely look into that because there is things that you should consider. So let's say that you do owe the debt. What are your kind of options in this situation? So we talked about answering the debt collection lawsuit, which buys you extra time in order to kind of figure out what you're going to do in this situation. And just a quick thing on debt collection and answering lawsuits, it's basically you're kind of like saying confirm or deny the allegations presented. Let's talk about the other options. The four kind of main options I would say in when you receive a debt collection lawsuit from Midland Funding is debt negotiation, bankruptcy, fight it, or do nothing. So with debt negotiation, you're trying to basically, you can use a firm that does that, or you can do it yourself. And we kind of help people, like if you're interested in kind of getting help with debt negotiation, give us a call at 833-272-3631 because we can kind of help you kind of figure out whether that's the best option or a option for you. But in debt negotiation, essentially what you're trying to do is you're trying to negotiate the debt for that Midland Funding lawsuit for a lower amount in what's called a stipulated judgment. And it could be multiple payments and it can be less than the amount owed. So let's say you owe $10,000, you may try to negotiate that down to like $7,000, $7,500 in a stipulated judgment that says, as long as you make all the payments, then you won't get a default judgment against you, but you need to make all the payments of that stipulated judgment. And that's a popular option if you have some money, are able to work out a negotiation. The second thing in that situation is potentially bankruptcy. That's why in a lot of these situations, you may be getting a bunch of bankruptcy mailers saying, hey, you just got sued, you should contact us for a bankruptcy consultation. And so bankruptcy is a popular option, for those who've been sued from the attorney of the creditor. And so that is an option to consider. The things here to consider are whether you qualify for Chapter 7 or Chapter 13 bankruptcy. And the debt calculator below actually allows you to kind of estimate whether you qualify for Chapter 7 bankruptcy and also the cost of those options. The third is kind of fighting the debt collection lawsuit, and that's kind of answering it. You could hire a debt defense attorney that will say, no, I don't owe this debt, or I didn't do this or that. So that's something. The third is do nothing. And so doing nothing is one of the situations where they're probably going to look for a default judgment and later garnish you or do something to basically recoup the funds. This option is super challenging because let's say they get a judgment today in 2022. Let's say they wait for 5 years until they start trying to extract that wage garnishment on you. And by that time, they've taken more interest and payments. And so what I've seen before is these debts that are maybe like a few thousand are now 15, 20,000. So just something to consider if you're kind of thinking about that do nothing option to kind of consider for yourself. Okay, so now that we covered kind of Midland Funding suing you and what your options are, I'd love it if you ask me any questions about Midland Funding specifically or your specific option. We try to get back to you as soon as possible. If you are looking to kind of understand your options to resolve this debt, please take our debt relief options calculator in the link below, as it kind of gives you estimates for debt settlement, debt negotiation, bankruptcy, or most of your different options so that you can kind of make the most informed decision. And yeah, thanks. And if you have any questions, give us a call to 833-272-3631. Thanks. I hope you have a great day.